Alright, I am trying this again. It's still at Holden, but today we finally have some sunshine, so I'm sort of excited. And starting my walk from the front parking lot today. I wasn't sure if I would do this today. I've been doing it a lot, but I'm starting to see it as a bit of a video journal, maybe, of my own little excursions, peppered with some musings here and there, and it's kind of forming a habit. I guess it's kind of cool to speak a little of what has been running through my mind quite a bit over all these years, unspoken. And what I find interesting is what actually comes out, because I'm not really planning anything. I'm not trying to do anything here. I just kind of see what happens, which to me is what's amazing about life in general, is that the spontaneity of living, that when you don't plan everything out and things just sort of happen, then that's when interesting things occur. If you think about it, when you plan your life out, every little step you're going to take, where's the excitement? Where's the newness in that? And I've found that in the few times in my life where I've taken some chances and relaxed the control mechanism or the controller in me and just allowed things to happen, that's when interesting things happen. And one particular time was when I decided to take a cross-country trip back in it was the end of 2023, when I just hopped in my Honda CR-V and drove from Ohio to Arizona, rented a little place there for a while near Sedona because I love that area, then took off to California, explored a little bit, but mostly in the Ojai area, which is where Jiddu Krishnamurti spent most of his life, speaking there, sort of his home base of operations, even though he traveled around the world and gave talks about things sort of similar to what I'm talking about today. But I always kind of wanted to go there, and those are stories for other days, or maybe never, because it's the past. And I always like to look forward, or I guess look now, although sometimes, I mean, I do look forward to like going back, taking maybe another cross-country trip, and maybe I can take you guys with me on my next excursion. Maybe this is sort of preparation for that, which would be very interesting if I traveled across the country, which, not intentionally, but obviously the Steinbeck novel Travels with Charlie, which inspired the name of this YouTube channel, is exactly what he did. Although I have to admit I never read his book yet. Maybe I should. But he took a cross-country trip with his dog Charlie in a very similar manner to what I did. And I don't even know if I was terribly aware of his book at the time, but I knew of it, but I guess I didn't know exactly what it was about. Then I found out what it was about, and I'm like, wait a second, that's similar to kind of what I did. And it was a great experience. I could probably write a book about that. But I'm not likely to do that because it's the past and it's gone and it's done. And I think I'm just kind of walking around the parking lot here today just to give you some sense for the scale that we have here at Holden. I haven't probably been focusing enough on the nature of this place, which is amazing, and it's one of the reasons why I come here so much, because it's not like one place, it's like, because of its size, it's like 10 places in one. There's so many trails and places to explore that I probably will do a lot of my exploring here just because there is so much to do. And I could take you on various trails and sort of think or not think or whatever on these various excursions. But anyway, sort of getting back to this video journal idea, which I guess is what this is all about. I'm not really hoping to achieve anything other than maybe recording some of my thoughts, perhaps for posterity, perhaps for my kids, for anyone who might be interested. I don't expect any sort of revolution to occur based on what I'm saying, although we do need a transformation in human consciousness. I mean, this is a fundamental issue. We kind of didn't touch on this, I don't remember if we did or not, but we live in very trying times where violence is rampant, self-centeredness seems to be the rule of the land, if not the world. We're separating ourselves more than ever from each other, digging in with national divisions and religious divisions, and it's really sad to see all this happening, because I know this is the opposite of what should be happening. We should be coming together, we should be breaking down national divisions, political divisions, religious divisions, and it's very interesting to observe, but not in a good way, because we're destroying ourselves, and if we don't wake up and see that, we will destroy ourselves. And I know the truth is the only way this is going to happen is not through some political revolution or even a new religious sect. I mean, we've had enough of them. We've had enough traditional religions over the course of history that we should recognize we need something else. That's not it. If there was just a return, in some sense, to simplicity that I think we lost somewhere along the line. Humanity took a wrong turn. This is an interesting phrase that came up in one of my favorite books with Jiddu Krishnamurti and David Bohm, a physicist, very famous physicist, who used to have many conversations. They were good friends. But one of their most interesting discussions were a very long series that they had multiple sittings on, I can't remember, maybe 30 hours worth at this point of discussions, and it was called The Ending of Time. You can find these videos on YouTube, and I would highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in either or both Krishnamurti or David Bohm. You know, it wasn't heavy physics. They're not talking about that. It was definitely more about where we are now and what could be done, and really an understanding of the greater truth, the holistic truth of everything, not some focus on any one particular thing, which is often what is done in physics. There's a focus on one thing or the other thing, but what about the whole? And so anyways, it's an interesting series of discussions I would recommend. But the one big takeaway I would say from listening to Jiddu Krishnamurti for years on YouTube, not just that, but he has many recorded dialogues, and I've read a lot of his books and his journal, his notebook. If you're interested at all, you'll find out all these things. But what I find interesting is that after all that time, what I think it has done, or there has been some shift in my thinking from one in which I was searching for something to one in which I was not. But it has instilled in me an interest in inquiry, which is what we're doing now. And that's very different. Inquiry is not passing on knowledge, it's asking a question to even yourself, or a question among, say, two people or small people, and letting the question evolve. You know, not rushing to a quick answer, not trying to answer it really quickly, because that's normally what we do when someone asks you a question, like, what's your name? You have an immediate response, and you reply. If somebody asks you a trickier question, like, what's the meaning of life? you're gonna stop for a moment. Your brain's gonna process and search its memory banks and see if it can find some answer to that. But a lot of times it is gonna try to find the answer in past knowledge, not in observing the world afresh. And I think that's the mistake. And that's the key thing that Krishnamurti has done, I think, is remind us that the most powerful instrument we have is our own inquiry into these important questions, not the reliance on experts or authority to provide us answers to these questions. That's the key thing. The key, when he talks, he starts off his dialogues almost always by saying, do not rely on any authority, including his own authority. Don't treat him like a guru. And then he always goes on to say, and don't create an authority within yourself, because you can form your own authority. You can start your own religion. You can start your own set of rules, right? And so you can't do that either, because if you do any of those things, you're trying to capture truth, which is a living thing, in some set of rules that are finite and limited. And I mean, you can't capture what's infinite and immeasurable within a limited set of rules or words. That's just obvious, right? And this is where I think, where thought can play some role, is to see its own limitations. If you think for a second, you acknowledge that thought is limited, and then you acknowledge that there is something infinite and immeasurable, but it cannot be described in a finite set of terms. And I think when you realize that, then thought itself sees its own limitation and maybe steps aside and says, I'm not needed right now. I'll take a back seat. Because there is no way to find truth through talking about it, even through any sort of established set of rules. It's really almost laughable when you think about it, that people develop different religious traditions, all fighting against each other. I'm right, you're wrong. My idea of the world is right. When you think, how could this even... It doesn't make any sense at all to believe that what is infinite and immense and sacred can ever be captured in one person's book or one person's set of practices or routines. You really have to see that stuff for what it is. It is just tradition that has been built up over time for people who are searching for security in an insecure world. Just let it all go. Let it all go for the moment. This is not to say it's nothing disparaging against any of these traditions. These are traditions. A lot of people hold them tightly. What I think is worth doing is take a break. Take a break from that tradition, right? You don't have to believe in something all the time. Allow yourself to be free, even if for just a moment, just a day or an hour. So for an hour, let me entertain the possibility that maybe my beliefs are limited and there's a higher truth, something that can't be expressed in words, something that is ineffable. And how can I find that? How can I discover it? How can I understand that, or embrace it, or feel it, or whatever you want to call, because all those are the wrong way of looking at it. How does the truth come about? How do I see it? Do I see it at all? See, it's the questions that matter. It's not the answers that matter. And if you probe a question deep enough, you find the solution. Often, the solution to any problem lies within the problem itself. If you understand the problem completely, you have completely solved the problem. This is something I've talked a lot about with people I've worked with over the years. Is I've seen so many people solve problems the wrong way because they don't understand the problem. So they solve the wrong problem. And just ordinary problems, mathematical problems, engineering problems. And I always say you have to understand the problem first before you even take a step towards the solution, because once you understand the problem, you have essentially written down the solution. The understanding of the problem is the solution. So when we ask these questions of ourselves that are more existential, these are bigger questions. Who am I? What is all this about? Why is the world in such turmoil? More importantly, why am I in such turmoil? What's going on in this world? What can we do about it, if anything? I think these are very important questions, but we shouldn't jump to answers, because that's how we get in this mess to begin with. We try to answer it with a new political party, or my new political candidate, the newest to come along. All we have to do is elect that person. I think we should see by now that politics is just a pendulum swinging back and forth, and I've seen enough back and forth for me to realize that that is not the solution to our problems. That there is no perfect candidate that's going to come in and solve it, because every one of those candidates is impartial, incomplete, does not see the whole, usually is focused on one or two things, not everything. And you can't solve our world problem by being that limited. You need a holistic understanding of everything, and that requires love. That requires something much different than the analytical approach that politicians use today. And so I've essentially given up on politics. I've given up on traditional religions, and even I've given up on science providing the answers, because a large part of my life was about me pursuing science, and I always sort of felt that's how we're going to understand everything, and we're going to find truth that way. And I have found partial truth in that way, but not the whole truth. And one of the things that I realized through my pursuit of knowledge, which is science, the pursuit of knowledge, is that it never ends. It's always incomplete. There's always more. Any answer you get is only a partial answer, never the whole answer. And I realized that I could spend my entire life doing this, and I'm not going to get any closer to, if you want to call it, universal truth, or truth with a big T. You know, the truth that explains why the world is such a mess, or why I am such a mess. That isn't going to be found out by studying the laws of physics, or understanding electromagnetics, or reading books on quantum mechanics, or whatever. Those are all useful, interesting little diversions from the big problem. But I realize now that the path in pursuit of knowledge is like the pursuit of anything. That it's a pursuit, and a lot of times it is for selfish purposes, you know, to improve yourself, to gain knowledge so you can use that knowledge as a club against other people. Say, I know, you don't know, look how smart I am. Ambition. You can be driven by ambition to always improve, and I'm not driven by those things anymore. I obviously, at the moment, you know, I have a job. I do what I have to do to get my work done, to contribute to the various projects and pursuits which I think are important, but not of universal importance. And that is what led me a few years ago to step back from all this and try to find the answers to these more important questions, which in a lot of ways I've been asking myself my whole life. I mean, I went into physics because I wanted to understand how things work, how does the universe work, and I guess in a lot of ways I found out how it worked. I didn't find out why it worked, and it's a bigger question. Why am I here? Why are we here? Why are we in this present state of disorder? as ourselves, as a society. What can we do? And I started by thinking, well, I have to understand my mind, because this mind is the same mind shared by all of humanity. So when we look in the world and we say there are problems in the world, well, those problems are because there are problems within our mind. And they're the same problems. Greed, anger, fear, desire are within us, and the world is shaped by us, our human society, not the natural world. The natural world is truth, what is uncorrupted by the human mind. But the society in which we live is such a corruption caused by these problems and limitations of the finite human mind. And so I embarked on a journey to understand my own mind. I put "my" in quotes. Really, it's an understanding of the human mind, not my mind, because there's no me aside from the mind that possesses the mind. The mind is me. That bundle of memories that we've talked about is me, and I am the same, not separate. Again, that's an internal division we like to create. When we say my mind, isn't it very interesting? Because what are you saying there is besides the mind that is you, that owns or possesses this mind? It really doesn't take much to figure out, to see very clearly that you and this mind are the same. So you cannot pretend that one part of your mind can own or possess another part of your mind, which is saying one thought becomes the controller and wants to control the rest of the mind. That creates internal division. This is also why, when I talked about self-improvement and all that, it's also saying there's some part of you that somehow knows better than the other parts, and that part is going to take control and dictate to the other parts of your mind how to be. It just creates conflict and division, which creates disorder in your own mind. Rather than that, if you observe who you really are, then you may find solutions that way. And I think that also applies to our mind, right? To our own internal conflict and problems. We, instead of trying to become better, or, I need to be better. I've heard people say things like, I need to become who Jesus wants me to be. And when I think of that, I think of how do you, that's a very complex statement, right? What makes you think you know what Jesus would want you to begin with? And how do you think you're going to change yourself? If you have anger in you, then how are you going to stop that anger? By having some other part of your mind control that anger? Well, that just makes that other part of your mind angry and destructive and divisive, rather than any of that. Observe the anger. Observe what it is about you what causes anger. Why am I angry? How does it arise? How does it go away? Observe the process of anger, just deeply, right? To the point where you know every aspect of it. It can't sneak by you. You know when it's arising, you know when it's going away. You have complete understanding of anger, and in that understanding of anger, is it still there? When you cast the light on something, maybe anger is what we call it when we don't understand it, and when we understand it, it's not called anything. It's simply who we are. And we understand our reactions. We don't have to react to everything in some way like that, that we may find distasteful. Just understand there are times when anger serves a purpose. It's some pattern in your mind that's triggered, and occurs. Observe what's happening and where it comes from, and don't fight it, you know? And this is observation. This is truth, because when you understand who you really are, first, even if, let's just say you were going to try to change yourself, you have to first understand who you are before you can start changing anything. So until you completely understand yourself, you can't even begin to hope to change it. How would you even begin? And this is why I think change fails so often for people, because they don't even know their starting point, who they are before the change. So how can you change to something else when you don't even know where you're starting from? That's like saying, I want to reach a destination, but I don't even know where I am now. Well, that's the source of all this confusion. So let's not do that. Let's just observe who we are, see exactly all your imperfections, who you are, from the tip of your toe to the top of your head, to every emotion, every thought that crosses your mind like a cloud across the sky. Observe it. Observe it without judgment, without the past interfering. And, you know, the problems, the so-called problems we talked about earlier, they need to be examined in the same way. The inner problems, the outer problems. And that process of inquiry is powerful, because in a way it's a holistic use of the brain, of the mind. It's not, you know, we're not searching for knowledge to solve our problems. And I can't begin to say what that is or what that process is, but consider it to be the use of the whole of your brain. Perhaps it's not using a part of your brain, it's using the whole brain, which, imagine if you could actually use the entirety of your brain to solve problems. Well, the way to do that is to not stop at partial solutions, to, you know, allow the energy of the human mind, which has evolved over so many millennia, to its fullest potential. And I'm not saying where this happens, it happens in the brain or whatnot, but it's not important. What's important is that you are aware, regardless of what this awareness is or where it comes from or its origin. You are aware. That's a truth. So be aware of everything happening inside of you and outside of you all the time, and just see what happens, right? And maybe you'll understand yourself better and understand maybe more what to do or what not to do. Which is also interesting, because when we have decision points, when you're faced with an important decision and you don't know what to do, that's because you're confused. You know, you're choosing between A and B, and you don't know whether you should choose A or B. It's because you really don't know everything. You have a limited understanding. You could be wrong, right? You may pick A and later regret it, and I should have picked B. And what that is because you don't fully understand with perfect clarity the situation. When you know what to do, there's no decision. You do it. There's no choice. You know, when you have perfect clarity, when you see perfectly the trail on the road, the trail that I see now, I see it perfectly. I know there's no choice in walking forward. I walk forward along the trail because I see it clearly, and I don't have to decide. If I reach a point where it splits, well, now I may not know, what do I go left, do I go right? And if I knew exactly what was left and exactly what was right, I know exactly where to go. I know what's going to happen if I go left and right, and it's not a decision, it's just an action. And there can be action without decision. There can be action without deliberation, which really just arises from confusion. So choice arises from confusion when you're choosing. So anyways, it's a beautiful day. A day probably where we shouldn't be talking so much. We should just be enjoying what's happening, the blue sky, especially the blue sky today. It's been a while since I've seen that, and it always makes things feel better. And just reminds me every time I come here how beautiful everything is and how little I need. This is like all I need, to be immersed in nature every day. To come out here is my favorite time of the day, because it really is when I feel most alive, and I'm not worrying about what I'm doing, solving other problems. I mean, it's just being immersed in the natural world with all of its beauty, which is something else we could talk about maybe another time. But anyways, I don't even know what we actually talked about today. I guess it was a stream of consciousness. Maybe I'll figure it out later. But I think it doesn't really matter what we talk about. I think the importance is what maybe I'm trying to convey. And also what's interesting is just the very process of what's happening, the process of dialogue, the process of inquiry, the way in which I'm going into these questions without a plan, without knowing ahead of time what I'm going to say, what I'm going to talk about, is bringing something to the table. It's not me planning out, or scripting what I'm going to say. It's allowing this brain, this mind, and this body to do its thing in some larger way. And words still come out, but they don't come in the same way as if you plan what you're saying, or you have a motive. I have no motive. I don't. My motive is to put one foot in front of the other at this point, to just be immersed in nature, and that requires no movement, no direction, no motive. I'm not trying to achieve a certain number of steps. Sometimes I do, but I'm not right now. I'm not trying to walk a certain number of miles or reach a destination. I'm just walking, and sometimes, when you're walking, just walk. Like, don't walk to get somewhere, and I find that's the most, when I'm open, when I'm feeling just this sense of togetherness and peace, if you want to call it that. It's when I am not trying to achieve something, and I'm just walking or just talking, and in the same sense, what I'm doing here is just talking. I'm not talking with a motive. I'm letting the words come from wherever, not worried or anxious about whether I'm going to say the right thing or the wrong thing, because I don't look at it that way. And I don't know if this is going to make any difference in anyone's life. It's not what I say that should make a difference. What should happen is every person, every one of you, should do this process of inquiry on your own or with someone else. Have a dialogue, a discussion between two friends, between two people, not an argument, and it's very different from that. And at some point I may bring someone else in, and we may have some conversations and dialogues about some of this stuff, which can make it interesting, because then you have, a larger mind in some sense, focusing on, or not even focusing, discussing a problem and seeing where it goes, seeing where it leads. It's more important for what's happening within the mind during the process of inquiry, rather than achieving a result. Inquiry is in some sense a state of mind where it's free. And a free mind is able to explore, is able to see new things. A mind that is constrained by the past can only see the past. It can only see through the lens of its conditioning. But a free mind can see something new, something it never saw before. And that is exciting, and that is life, and that is truth. Because truth is not a static thing. The reason there's no path to truth is because truth would have to be a static thing. You can only have a path to a stationary thing. I have a path right now to something in front of me because it's a position, it's located, it's in a fixed point. Truth is not a fixed point. It's not something you can chart a course for. But so many people treat it that way. Follow this path. Even in Buddhism. I've mentioned Buddhism before, but it's become so prescriptive. follow these procedures, join a monastery, do these things, follow the Eightfold Path religiously, and you will achieve something. It's a path. It is really regarded as a path to enlightenment, right? So there is a definite sense, and I don't think that actually comports with what the Buddha was trying to convey. I think that I guess I don't know, right? I don't know. I wasn't around when the Buddha was around. I don't know what he said directly. I don't know what was altered or changed, and this is why we can't rely on these things. It's old. It's static. It's dead. The past is dead, and you can't learn from a dead thing. You need to learn from a living thing, which is now. And that is why observing now and seeing what is truth today at this moment is the real process of inquiry, not studying the words on a page that may or may not be correct. For what purpose? You don't know what's correct, you don't know what's not correct, you don't know what was actually said, what was added later. Why do you need to find truth that way? Just step outside, watch yourself, watch your body, watch your mind, and truth finds you. You don't have to find it. There's no reason to go running after truth when truth, in some sense, is running after you. So, all right, I guess I will sign off for now. Maybe I'll come back later. It's a beautiful day. I want to spend some time quietly walking around, but I'm suppose later I might have something more I want to convey. Have a great day, no matter what you're doing. Okay, signing off.